30 to 90 days. That is the extinction velocity metric for an isolated human population once a novel pathogen breaches its perimeter. We possess a precise historical baseline for this timeline. In 1996, illegal loggers forced physical contact with the Marunawa people in the Peruvian Amazon. Within a matter of years, acute respiratory infections drove a mortality rate exceeding 50%. That precedent is now an active threat matrix mapping directly onto the Zona Intangible zone, a strictly regulated ethnographic boundary holding several uncontacted groups. In the event of an unchecked physical intrusion into the Intangible Core by illegal loggers or wildcat miners during the dry season, an airborne viral pathogen could spread through uncontacted bands within 14 days. Due to complete immunological vulnerability and lack of internal medical response mechanisms, a single point source infection could lead to total demographic extinction of specific isolated ethno-linguistic lineages within 30 to 90 days. Here lies the paradox of modern conservation. We operate the most technologically advanced spatial surveillance architecture in human history, yet it is failing to arrest an accelerating biological extermination vector. The Madre de Dios watershed spans an ecological gradient from the high Andean slopes down into the Amazon basin, forming a massive geographical fortress. To monitor this expanse, intelligence agencies deploy multimodal spatial temporal vision transformers to track agricultural expansion at 10-meter resolution, backed by gap-free LiDAR tracking precise canopy heights. But orbital data cannot alter terrestrial geography. The seasonal drop in river levels exposes massive gravel bars, which serve as essential foraging grounds for isolated populations harvesting turtle eggs. This geological formation forces visual and physical proximity between illegal rivercraft navigating the channels and the uncontacted Mashco Piro exposed on the banks. Multispectral satellite visibility does not guarantee biological isolation. It merely quantifies the exact coordinates of the impending epidemiological breach. To understand how this boundary fails, we must examine the Editop AI algorithm, deployed by Peru. It relies on a constant feed of Sentinel-2 and Landsat multispectral imagery. The Editop algorithm isolates concentrated canopy microdisturbances, indicative of selective logging, continuously cross-referencing them against authorized concession boundaries. Between 2024 and June 2025, the algorithm successfully identified 42 cases of unauthorized logging across Peru, totaling 23,351 cubic meters of illegal timber extraction. Connecting these detection nodes directly to the mahogany extraction pipeline reveals the massive physical volume of the removed forest resources, hauled straight out of supposedly protected buffer zones. Models verify illicit extraction with 90% accuracy. The continuous logging footprint is a failure of enforcement, isolated from the state. This digital map composite, consisting of Sentinel-1 radar bands from the Community Palm model, visualizes a risk assessment framework where risk equals the sum of potential land cover transitions multiplied by their probability. The exact marginal probability of this transition is calculated as P01 equals P to palm equals PPT minus rho times f of xt times 1 minus f of xt times f of xt minus 1 times 1 minus f of xt minus 1 to the 1/2 plus f of xt times f of xt minus 1. In this equation, the f of xt variable represents the neural network's estimated conditional probability of land cover presence given a specific vector of covariates at a specific time. By measuring spatial autocorrelation within a localized 310 by 310 meter neighborhood, the model defines the mathematical likelihood of a transition from stable forest to an active extractive zone. The predictability of encroachment is absolute. The system knows exactly where the boundary will fail next. If orbital mechanics predict the breach, biological data predict the outcome. We must shift our analytical scale from 10-meter orbital pixels to the 16S rRNA gene sequences of Amazonian hunter-gatherer microbiomes. This dual-axis bar chart compares traditional hunter-gatherer metagenomics against urbanized populations, illustrating the extreme taxonomic richness required to process complex dietary fibers in the deep Amazon. Metagenomic profiling reveals that the Yanomami gut microbiota is dominated by the phylum Bacteroidetes over firmicutes, with a median ratio of 0.24, and exhibits a highly significant abundance of the genus Prevotella and Lactobacillus. Conversely, the genus Bacteroides is virtually absent. The total absence of Western-adapted Bacteroides leaves these isolated populations without the synthesized metabolites required to mount a rapid immunological defense. When urban pathogens enter this pristine biological baseline, the lack of adaptive antibodies triggers immediate virgin soil epidemics that overwhelm naive immune responses. Exposure to Western pathogens bypasses standard respiratory failure entirely. It induces an unrecoverable systemic metabolic collapse across the entire exposed population. The biological vectors carrying these pathogens into the intangible zone are actively shifting. The Oropouche virus has evolved from an isolated Amazonian pathogen into a severe public health threat. Recent monitoring has identified a new resortant strain of Oropouche, combining genetic segments from the eastern Amazon with highly virulent localized Peruvian strains. Primary transmission relies on the high competence of Culicoides paracensis midges. This is now exacerbated by the expanding footprint of the Aedes aegypti mosquito, establishing breeding grounds along rural river ports. The inland movement of these specific vectors correlates directly with human migration and the construction of new illicit infrastructure pathways, cutting deep into the buffer zones. Illicit logging roads and deforestation corridors act as highly efficient biological highways, delivering these engineered pathogen strains directly to the border of the intangible zone. The scale of this infrastructure is tracked by Amazon Mining Watch spatial data, which maps a cumulative 2 million hectare footprint across the basin. New gold mining deforestation totaled 6,020 hectares in 2024 alone, focused heavily in the alluvial basins of Madre de Dios. Data shows that approximately 36% of this cumulative mining footprint is located within protected areas and officially recognized indigenous territories. This encroachment isn't always illegal. The Canales Tawa Manu SAC logging concession operates directly inside Mashco Piro territory while holding sustainability certifications from the Forest Stewardship Council. This certified industrial operation physically displaces the Mashco Piro, shrinking their ancestral foraging grounds and triggering violent, fatal encounters involving defensive archery against logging personnel. International sustainability frameworks are complicit in this spatial encroachment when they fail to integrate independent remote sensing audits into their compliance metrics. The indigenous organization FENIMAD has waged a decades-long legal offensive, tracing from their 1990s push for a territorial reserve to case number 13.752 before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. Yet their efforts strike a fatal loophole in Peru's Law No. 28736. The law theoretically protects isolated peoples, but legally permits resource exploitation if the state declares it a matter of public necessity. This singular public necessity clause systematically overrides the precise probability risk models and deep learning detections tracking the biological collapse of these territories. The state's response relies on immediate legal suppression, culminating in the invocation of the anti-NGO law, requiring July 8 provisional measures from the Inter-American Court to protect environmental defenders from state sanction. The Madre de Dios panopticon does not fail due to technological or mathematical limits. The failure is entirely jurisprudential. The state legally overrides its own mathematical survival models. If we strip away the legal frameworks and return to raw, high-altitude Earth observation, we find unresolved, highly disruptive spatial anomalies detected deep within the core of the Zona Intangible. These pre-Columbian anthropogenic soil modifications prove that this supposedly pristine wilderness was actually a densely populated, highly managed landscape prior to the 16th century demographic collapse. And this historical ghost is paired with a modern sensory anomaly recorded by the automated hydroacoustic sensor arrays on the Alto Manu border. Satellite LiDAR scanning has revealed dozens of geometrically aligned linear ditches and mounded earthworks beneath the core intangible zone canopy. Remote acoustic sensors along the Alto Manu border have repeatedly recorded low-frequency rhythmic acoustic signals that do not align with natural river dynamics, geological shifts, or commercial machinery, remaining entirely unexplained in official Surnamp logs.